All right, I am familiar with our next guest's work. Literally, actually, Jackson Holzer, part of the coaching tree. Paulie, he
Congratulations! What an honor for him.
It is an honor. Host of Locked On Syracuse, Jackson. How are things?
I'm doing well, Steve. How are you?
It's great to see you.
It's very weird calling you Steve.
No, you can't.
You were my professor.
I know.
So I usually call you Professor Infante.
You can do that. I would prefer that.
And then now I call you Steve.
No, it's all. That's how I would prefer it. Once you get out in the real world, now it's Steve.
I don't know if you heard the end of our last segment, but the name Jackson is very popular.
It is very popular.
Right
Some
now.
say that Jackson is the best name you can possibly have.
Is that you that says that?
Some.
Do you
Some
feel like
people
it's
say
being a Jackson now? Like, do you feel it's overused though? Like,
No.
Okay.
More Jacksons the better, but only with the CK. I heard you say the X. That doesn't count.
Okay.
CK.
All right.
Is that like Eric with a K? That doesn't count. The right way to spell Eric is with a C?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of like that.
I understand. All right, let's talk some Syracuse sports, and I guess we should probably start with football. And I realize you haven't been here as long as Paulie and I, but what Fran Brown has done in a very short period of time is it's remarkable to me. I think it's remarkable to Paulie. What do you make of what he's been able to do in terms of changing the talent on this roster and really the expectations of this program in a short period of time?
Well, I haven't been around here for a while, but I have tracked the recruiting for him. I went on 24/7 Sports, and I was like, hey, where has Syracuse been in the last 20 years in recruiting? And what Fran Brown has been doing is completely unprecedented in the past 20 years. Bringing in a top 10 class so far in the class of 2025, that hasn't happened in 20 years. A top 5 class in 2026, which you take with a grain of salt, but still, you got a 5-star top 20 composite recruit. He has drastically upgraded the talent. And in terms of this season, utilizing the transfer portal, getting guys like Kyle McCord and Fadil Diggs, those are legitimate big-time players.
Yeah.
Legitimate stars in the SEC and in the Big Ten. I think a fair expectation is around 8 wins for this year. And then going forward, who knows? Maybe with the expanded college football playoff, Syracuse one day finds itself there.
I can tell you, because I was alive before the internet, we discussed this yesterday, there hasn't been a top 10 team at Syracuse, I would say, since the likes of getting Jim Brown and players of that nature. Even the Coach P and Coach Mack era was not getting top 10 recruiting classes. They were building players slowly.
Right. And you go back to like the 87 team that went undefeated, and while they had a lot of talent, it was guys who really developed within the program too. So, from a recruiting standpoint, he's hitting it out of the park. You said a moment ago, Jackson, 8 wins is a realistic, attainable goal for this team. Do you think if they fall short of that, that it will be a disappointment?
I think for me, no.
Or is that fair?
For me, no. I think if they make a bowl game, I'll be pretty happy. It's the first year of a new coach, and the last 4 new head coaches for Syracuse have not typically done very well in their first seasons. I believe only Scott Schaefer made a bowl game in year 1, and that's it, the last 4. So I wouldn't be too upset if they win 6-7 games. But I can tell from the fan base and from my comment section on all my podcasts that people would be very, very upset if they fall short of at least 8 wins. I mean, they're getting people talking about 9, 10 wins, and I'm not willing to go there just yet. I think 7-8 wins is realistic. It's obtainable with the schedule that they currently have. I do believe they are going to slip up sometime in October and November with the 5 of the 6 road games. And then Miami to close the year, I think, is probably the toughest game on the schedule. 7-8 wins to me is fair expectation, and if they hit that mark, I won't be too upset. If they win 6, not a big deal.
Everybody says it's the schedule, but when you look at the teams, Ohio won 10 games last year. UNLV was in a bowl last year. Do you think the schedule is as easy as everybody's making it out to be?
No, I don't. I don't think it's as easy. It's because they don't have Clemson and Florida State. You don't have the 2 automatic losses on the schedule. If Syracuse is playing Florida State and Clemson, they're going to lose. The talent gap is just too big. They're not going to win that game. Miami is the toughest one on the schedule, even though it's at home, because Syracuse in the past has struggled against teams that just have better athletes. I know that Miami underachieves typically, but they have those big boys up front. And that is probably the biggest concern of Syracuse right now is up front. So I think Miami wins that game. And I think Georgia Tech, I believe it's the second game of the year, is the big test.
You two agree on
Yes.
that?
Georgia Tech.
I don't like the way that fell in the scheduling.
I don't mind it because in the past, Syracuse would start off really well. They'd be like 4-0, 6-0, whatever. And I'd be like, well, who are they playing? They're playing nobodies. Of course they're 4-0. But now you start with two of your first 4 games in the ACC. I think it's a good challenge for this team. And if they blow out Georgia Tech, I think that will basically be the barometer of how this season is going to go.
I would say the second toughest game behind Miami is probably, in my opinion, at NC State. I think that will be it's a road game. They've struggled with NC State. To go back to like what Coach Mack used to do, and we're aging ourselves here, Jackson, but Coach Mack would go down the schedule before the season, and he would talk about from a talent perspective, does Syracuse have more or less talent than this team? And he would look at it and say, okay, this is what the record should be. If you go down this schedule, it's hard to find more than 2 opponents that you could say. Again, I think Miami is certainly ahead of Syracuse. I would tend to think NC State is. Outside of those two, I don't think Georgia Tech necessarily has more talent than Syracuse, and it's a home game, and it's early in the year when Syracuse has Kyle McCord and obviously a star quarterback coming in, and you feel good about that position. I don't know. Do you find more than 2 teams? And I'm not saying they're going to win 10 games. I'm just saying it's hard to find more than 2 opponents that you're like, yeah, that opponent's got a lot more talent than Syracuse.
That's why people are optimistic about it, because Syracuse does have more talent this year than in years past.
Sure.
But at the same time, you got 5 of 6 on the road in October and November.
Not easy.
And yeah, the schedule looks great in terms of this team doesn't have more talent than Syracuse, but a lot of it is close.
Toss-up games.
It's close. It's a toss-up. So you're not going to bat 1,000 in toss-up games. And if you do, then the following year, you're going to bat 0.
Right.
How it works is that you're basically going to split the toss-ups. And so I'm like,
sure.
Maybe there are only 2 games on the schedule that I'm like, yeah, that's probably a loss. But I just can't see Syracuse then just running the table.
Yeah. I totally agree. I hear what you're saying.
I'm kind of getting grief for saying that Ohio and UNLV both went to bowl games last year. They both beat Power 5 schools last year.
I'm more worried about UNLV than I would be about Ohio. Yeah. I think week 1 at home against Ohio, you got to win that game. And you got to win that game by 20 plus.
A lot of expectations, though. Like, again, not to compare Fran Brown to Greg Robinson, because I don't think there's any comparison there. Yeah. But you remember it. Yeah. I mean, talk about buzz, and you weren't here for this, Jackson.
You're basically comparing Greg Robinson is Lord Voldemort here, okay?
But again, the result, like retrospect, we look back on it, knowing what happened, and we joke about it, but living through it, when Greg Robinson came here,
it was a sellout.
And at his press conference, he had the shiny Super Bowl ring, and it was a sellout, and it was West Virginia here for the opener.
Quad walk was packed.
There was so much buzz, and then they went out and they laid an egg, and it was one of the worst football games I've ever seen in my life, and it set the tone.
Didn't they go 1-10 that year? That's how bad that team was.
It was awful. And, that game in particular, I don't know off the top of my head how many false starts. It was false starts. There was delay of games. They could not score. It was awful. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but my point is with Ohio, there is going to be a ton of expectations with that game, and there is going to be some pressure.
And it's not West Virginia either, so he has that advantage.
That's true.
You're not Power 5 in it to start.
Right. You're not playing West Virginia. That's a good point. It's not like that's true. That is true.
But isn't this all a good thing though?
Oh, absolutely.
Isn't the best place to be is when expectations are high. All right, you got to be willing to deal with pressure of good expectations. In the past, Syracuse football has had no expectations. Yes. So if it's pressure. I mean, that is what it is. You got to go out there and do your job.
I guess the reason I brought it up was, to say, I think we all say, well, Syracuse should beat Ohio. All I'm saying is there's going to be a lot of pressure on them that night, and hopefully they go out and they handle it well, but I'm not willing to say that's going to be a cakewalk.
Brian Higgins says that game was terrible, and yet it's somehow spent 4 years getting worse.
That is true.
It's impossible to do. Move on to basketball now?
That is true. Yeah, let's do that. So 3 scholarships left available to Adrian Autry and the guys. How do you think they go about using them? Do you think they will use those last 3 scholarships that they have right now?
I don't think they will use all 3. The way I look at it is they need one more impactful guard. and they need one more center that's just purely a body.
Which I think this high school kid they got coming in is going to fill that position.
There you go. That's literally all it needs to be. I said when they lost William Patterson, I was like, all right, like, we don't need the greatest player in the world here. I know Nort Shadowmere's in the transfer portal. That's all great and all. But center position, they're fine. They just need someone who can give them 4 fouls or someone that's going to redshirt for the year. For Frank Anselm, honestly, in the transfer portal, I don't know if he's really been connected to Syracuse, but that's perfect. 3rd-string center. That's.
I think you and I are on the same page here.
That's all they need. It's just a 3rd-string center. This high school kid, sure. But I think they really, really need an impactful guard, preferably someone that can shoot the 3 ball. Because right now they only have a couple of shooters on the team, and they just need one more.
Let me ask you this that I'll ask you in this form. If you were currently in the portal and a guard that could shoot the 3, is Syracuse a place you would come to when you look at the 5 guards on the roster?
Well, Paulie, how much money are you offering?
Yeah. Well, all right, let's say I don't know what number to give you, but say it's $100,000. I'll keep it Syracuse realistic.
$100,000, and my role is
just the 3-point shooter off the bench.
So am I getting 15 minutes?
I don't know. Can I promise you that with Chance Westry ahead of you because of all the things I've heard about?
Is Chance Westry ahead of me?
Yes.
Well, he's ahead of me personally, I'd hope. But
I would assume.
I think he's ahead of a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that I heard last year was he was going to be the 2nd best player on the team.
Yeah. He'll be ahead of you. I'm guessing Carlos would be ahead of you.
Starling is ahead.
Starling's ahead of you.
So
on
the 4th guard.
Yeah.
Somehow Elijah Moore's got to see the court.
Oh, yeah. You got Elijah Moore ahead of you.
He's got to see the court somehow.
You've got Kyle Cuff on the roster.
All right. Well, so it's really those first 3 that you mentioned. Outside of that, like Elijah Moore is a low-end 4-star recruit, and the only way he's going to see the floor next year is if he's hitting his shot right away.
If you're a senior in the portal, or do you want to battle a freshman for playing time?
I don't think you're really going to have to battle him if you're a senior.
Yeah, you will probably. If he's knocking him down in practice, you're going to have to knock him down too.
And if they want him to be a part of the future of their program, and they do, he's got to play. I mean, he's got to see the floor in some capacity, or he's hitting the portal and he's gone. So it is it's tough.
It's interesting what you're saying, but at the end of the day, it all depends on who they get. If you get someone who's middle of the road, then sure, that might be tough because that player, I know you guys were talking about Quadir Copeland, a Quadir Copeland type player in the portal might be tough to convince to come to Syracuse right now. But I know it's probably far-fetched, but Kadari Richmond's in the portal. If Kadari Richmond comes to Syracuse, he's playing.
Sure, he'd get time.
He's playing.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, we've said that.
Yeah.
And so now the deadline's passed. They can't enter the portal now. I'm sorry. This is when you have to go kind of cutthroat here.
Yeah.
If you bring in someone who's really that good, like Kadari Richmond, well, sorry, Jaquan Carlos or whoever came over to Syracuse, your role probably will be a little bit diminished.
Yeah. Kadari Richmond's going to get a lot more money from another school.
Yeah, and
I'm guessing.
St. John's apparently was the leader for him. I
Kentucky
heard it
wants him.
From Jeff Goodman, I think he tweeted that out or something.
Yeah, and the Evans kid that everybody wanted Syracuse to get is supposedly St. John's number 2 choice if Kadari doesn't come there.
Well, that's the thing. The Ken Evans stuff came out of nowhere. Kadari Richmond's obvious. Ken Evans came out of nowhere. He was not on the radar whatsoever. This is a kid from the South. And all of a sudden, people are posting Instagram stories.
Well, anybody that enters the portal, everybody's like, yeah.
And then he starts following people and everything like that. So that's when you start connecting the dots and you look at it. And if Syracuse were to get a guy like Ken Evans to come to the team, he's going to play.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. Like, you're guaranteeing him probably 25-plus minutes a night.
See, I don't know that.
He would definitely start.
How do we know? We don't know that.
He would be the first or the second best guard on the team.
But how do you know that?
Like, you have to go. That's the problem. At Syracuse, you're going to have to earn the time right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's other.
Do you think Kyle Cuff's just going to roll over and not bust his ass all offseason?
Kyle Cuff can do all of that stuff. He's still not better than Ken Evans.
You don't know that.
Yes, I do.
Kyle Cuff was a huge recruit.
Kyle Cuff hasn't done anything in 2 years to suggest you should play more than 2 to 5 minutes.
He was hurt in one.
Well, injuries happen.
And he was behind you.
He was in Kansas and Syracuse. And listen, I'm not taking a shot at Jackson State, but let's see how it plays. I don't think we can say anything is guaranteed. Yeah. Let's put it that way. And we haven't seen Chance play at all.
You have to earn time at Syracuse. That's why Kadari Richmond isn't here.
Kadari Richmond. Okay. Ken Evans, if you want to say he's going to have to earn playing time, sure, fine. Kadari Richmond does not have to earn playing time. If he comes to Syracuse, if the money is right, he's playing.
Yeah.
There is no earning playing time.
Yeah, I don't guarantee it's starting or a 25
when
minutes.
Eddie Lampkin committed to Syracuse, is he going to be fighting for the starting center?
No, there's nobody to fight with.
Exactly.
It's a totally different.
But no, it's not really, because when you look at a guy like Kadari Richmond, who's that good, who's a top 5 player in the portal right now, he's going to play wherever he goes.
Play here,
he's playing.
If
you want to say a middle of the road guard is going to have to fight for a spot, sure. But those elite guys, no, they're coming here. They're going to play.
Yeah, I think Evans and Richmond are two different stories. I think Kadari, yes, he would come. I think wherever he goes, he's the starting point guard. I think with Ken Evans, we would have to see how it played out.
I think he would earn the job. I think he would earn it because of what he can do.
Maybe.
He's also big.
Yeah, he is. But I think they've got options. And that's a good problem to have. What?
I hate to get rid of Jackson.
I know we got to go.
The worst.
I know we're running late. I got it. But Jackson, always great to see you. Enjoy
good chatter.
Enjoy your summer.
Thank you.
And hopefully we will talk again soon. That's Jackson Holzer. We'll take a timeout again. Hour number 2. We've got Drew Carter coming up at 1. We've got Jake Brown coming up at 1:30. Back after this on ESPN Radio.